How do you connect an external amplifier to a processor or an AVR? That is what we're going to cover in this video. So there are two main ways or options that you have to connect an external amplifier. The first option is an RCA cable, and the second option is an XLR cable. Now, what is the difference between these two? The main difference is that the RCA cable is unbalanced and the XLR is balanced. And where that makes the difference is that with the balanced XLR cable, it's shielded from interference from other devices. Any electrical interference that may be hitting the cable is going to be rejected by the balanced connection over the XLR cable. And this is actually going to come into play later on in the video where we run into a problem with the RCA cable, but we'll get to that in a bit. Now, depending on what processor or receiver you have, you may be limited on what option you have available to you. Now, in the case of this processor, this is an Anthem AVM 70. It has both the RCA outputs and it also has the XLR outputs. So I can use either. But on my Onkyo TX-RZ50, it only has the RCA outputs. So I don't even have the option to use the XLR cables. So if you have the choice of which one to use, I recommend going with the XLR for that benefit of having it be shielded from outside interference. But if you only have RCA outputs, then you're limited and that's your only option. How do we get the RCA cables or the XLR cables connected to the processor or AVR and then into the external amplifiers? Now, as I mentioned, I have the Anthem AVM 70 here. And then for the for the amplifiers, I have the Outlaw Audio 5-channel, which is the 5000X, and then the 7-channel, which is the 7000X. Now, I've already connected up my speaker cables because if you're watching this video to learn how to connect an external amplifier, you're probably already familiar with how to connect up a speaker cable. So we're going to assume that you already know how to do that. So you've got your speaker cables connected to the speaker connectors on your external amplifier. What is the next step? Well, now in the case of my Outlaw Audio amplifiers here, there's a couple things to consider. One is that there is a toggle switch on each connection, and you can choose either XLR or RCA. So that's pretty self-explanatory. If you're going to be using RCA, you would set the toggle switch to RCA. If you're using XLR, switch it over to XLR. The other thing to consider is that your external amplifier may be labeled with which speaker to use for that particular connection. So for instance, here on the far right, it's labeled left. And then if you go one over, it's left surround, and then left surround back, etc. These labels are not, you're not locked in to connecting that specific speaker to that connection. That is just there for convenience if you decide to use it that way. But literally, you can connect any speaker to the connection that's labeled left or the one that's labeled left surround. It really doesn't matter. They're all the same. And the other thing to consider is that sometimes using those labels isn't even an option. For instance, because I have two amplifiers, well, the one on the top here, it has one of the connections labeled center. And if I go down to the 5-channel one, the middle connection is also labeled center. I'm not able to exactly match how the connections are labeled because otherwise I would end up with a connection down here that's labeled center and I wouldn't be able to use it because I don't have a second center channel. So just know that the labels don't lock you in to which speakers are connected to those particular connections. So that is the main thing to consider. The other thing, this is of particular note. So very often your external amplifiers will have a 12-volt trigger port. And what you do with that is you connect up a 12-volt trigger cable and you connect it to that, and then the other end goes into the 12-volt trigger connection on your AVR or processor. That way, when you power on your processor, the amplifiers automatically power up. That way you're not having to like go through and hit the power button on every single device. It just automatically powers on, and then when you power off the AVR or processor, the amplifiers turn off. So that's a nice feature. Okay, so let's get started on connecting up these speakers or connections to the external amplifiers. So we're going to start with the center channel connection. So on the AVR, you look for the center channel, and you've got the RCA connection that is labeled center. So we're going to plug the RCA cable in there, and then we're going to go to the speaker wire that comes from the center channel here, and I'm just going to trace it by hand here to where it's located, and it comes up to this connection, the second one from the left on this amplifier. And so I'm going to connect the RCA cable to the RCA connection on that speaker. And then I'm also going to make sure that the toggle switch is set to RCA. Moving on, we're going to go to the left speaker. This is the left main. So I'm going to plug it in there to the left main, and then I'm going to trace the wire from the left main, comes up here, it goes to this connection. And again, I'm going to make sure that the toggle switch is set to RCA. So these are pretty easy. The center, the left, the right, they're pretty easy. I'm just going to do the right one here, and then this one comes from here, and it goes to this connection. Okay. Where it gets a little tricky, not super tricky, but a little trickier, is when you get to the side speakers, the surround speakers, and the height speakers. So on this particular processor, we have labeled surround and back. So if I am doing a speaker configuration, in this case, in this room, which is a 7.1.4, so I've got 7 bed layer speakers and 4 height channels, then the surround speakers are going to be the speakers that are on the side of the room. And then the connections that are labeled back, those are the speakers that are going to be the back speakers that are going to be behind the listening position. Now, if I were doing a 5.1.4, so 5 bed layer speakers, then the surround speaker connections would be used for my side speakers, even if I placed them in the back. So this is kind of important. So if you are placing your surround speakers behind your head in a 5.1.4 configuration, even though they're back of the main listening position, you're going to use the surround speaker connection, because that's the next in line after your LCRs, your left, center, right. The next speaker back is going to be connected to the surround connections. And then if you add 2 more speakers, then you connect them up to the back connection. Hopefully that makes sense. So we'll just go ahead and connect those up. So we've got surround left. We'll trace that over here. That goes to here. And then we have the surround right. So that's going to be this side speaker here. And that one goes to this connection here. And now we have our rear speakers, the back speakers, that as they're labeled on this processor. Now, this is another important point. Your processor or your AVR, it may be labeled a little bit differently, but it should be surrounds, which are going to be your sides, and then your backs, which are rear. And it's going to be the same way. If you're not using the rear speakers and you're using just sides, or those speakers that go on the side or you're placed behind, should be labeled as surround. But just know to watch for that. It's kind of tricky. But if you do get the wrong connections, When you go into your processor to configure it and you do a test tone through your surround speakers and you're not getting the test tone, you're not getting anything, then you may need to switch them. So you have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get those connected up. So the left back speaker goes to here, and then the right back speaker goes to here. Okay, now we're going to go to the height speakers. Now, this is another area where it can be a little bit tricky, but not too bad. If you are only doing one set of height speakers, then your heights are going to be connected to the height 1 connections. If you are, even if they're, regardless of where they're placed in the room, if you only have one set of height speakers, connect them to the height 1. And then if you add a second set, so you have 2 sets of height speakers, then the set that is to the rear of the first set is going to be using the height 2 connection. And same with if you add a third set of speakers in the heights, then the ones that are all the way at the back, those are going to be connected to height 3. So we'll just go ahead and get those connected up here. Now my height speakers are all connected to this 5-channel amp down here on the bottom. And because it's a 5-channel amp and I'm only using 4 height speakers, then one of the channels is not going to be used. I'm not going to have anything connected to it, and that's totally fine. It's totally fine to do that. So now we'll connect up the second set of height speakers, and those are connected to these speakers, the second set, this amplifier, and now to the last one, which is height 2 right, and that connects to here. And then obviously making sure that the toggle switches are all set to RCA. So now at this point, I've got all 11 speakers connected up to the processor over an RCA connection. Now, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that you might run into a problem with RCA cables. In my case here, when I originally connected up this Anthem AVM 70 to this theater, I used RCA cables. And as soon as I got it all hooked up, plugged in, powered on, I was getting some speaker hum out of a few of the speakers, particularly the mains and the sides. And it was faint, but it was very noticeable and very clear and distinct when I put my ear up in the speaker. When I was sitting at the main listening position, I could kind of hear it. It was a little more, it was faint, but I could still hear it. And I didn't like that. Now, I did try to eliminate that hum by connecting the grounding lugs on the external amplifiers to the grounding lug on the Anthem AVM 70. I thought, well, maybe that will fix it. It could be a ground loop problem where there's electrical current that's flowing, and by grounding everything together, that will eliminate it. It did not fix it. I connected up. I used speaker wire, just a single line for each connection to connect up the grounding lugs on these 2 amplifiers to this grounding lug, and the speaker hum persisted. It still was humming away. So the solution for that was I removed all of the RCA cables. I took them all out, and I replaced all of the connections with the XLR cables. And the speaker hum went away. And I attribute that to the fact that the XLR cables are balanced. They're shielded. They reject any electrical interference that is hitting them. Now, I've heard it said that the only advantage to having XLR cables is if your speaker runs, your connection from the processor to the amplifiers is longer than 10 feet or 20 feet or something like that. That this balanced cable, the only benefit is if you have really long speaker runs and they're being hit with interference. If it's just short runs, then there's no benefit. Well, I can tell you that in this case, in this specific instance, even though the length is only 3 feet, there was a significant benefit to using XLR cables, because even over that short distance, I was picking up a lot of interference and it was creating hum in the speakers. So I'm a believer in XLRs. Like if you have the option to use XLR cables, I say do it. Even if you connect up a RCA and you don't get any speaker hum, I just think XLR, I mean, they're not that much more expensive. Like I bought this 10-pack of XLR cables. I've got them all right here, and they're all different colors, which is very handy when you're trying to trace. You're like, oh, the back left speaker, and oh, it's orange. Oh, well, yeah, it just goes right down there. It's very easy to spot, very easy to identify. And I'll put a link in the description for this 10-pack of XLR cables. I just think it's worth it. I think it's worth it to use XLR because it's just cleaner. It's a cleaner power. It's a cleaner signal. And in this case, it was necessary. It was the only way I could get rid of that speaker hum. Using the grounding lugs didn't do it. So I've already gone over how to connect up the RCA cables. The XLR cables, it is exactly the same process, because in the case of how these RCA outputs are labeled, the XLR outputs are labeled the exact same way. You've got left, center, right, surround, back, height 1, height 2, etc. And the only difference is that in the case of an XLR cable, is they have these it's kind of a nice feature where it snaps into place. And so when you put it in, it clicks into place right there. And then when you go to remove it, you have to press the release button and then remove it. So it snaps into place there, and then it also has a identical kind of snapping mechanism on the other end where you put it into place, it snaps in, and then if you need to release it, you just press the tab and remove the cable, and it just comes out very easily like that. So XLR, just the better way to go. So I highly recommend that. I think that about covers everything for how to connect up an external amplifier. Good luck, and thanks for watching.